What's going on, everybody? Kalipis Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the BLU F92e 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now, when it comes to price ranges, these phones are clearly complete opposites, but if you're new to 5G phones or smartphones in general, you might be trying to decide whether you should get something more affordable like the BLU F92e 5G, or spend the extra money and get something like the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE instead. So we're going to be going over the similarities and differences between these two phones to help you make a decision a bit better. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the BLU F92e 5G, we're getting a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 411, and a 20:9 aspect ratio as well. Now, on one hand, as you can clearly see, the BLU F92e 5G is definitely a much larger phone, but despite this, the actual difference in display size isn't quite as much as you might think. Despite the phone physically being much larger, the actual display size is really only different by a 1/10 of an inch, which, don't get me wrong, it is something, but it's definitely not that much. And the rest of it is really just because of the bezels, as you can see. With the BLU F92e 5G, the bottom and top bezels are just quite a bit thicker, and the sides as well, which is pretty typical for more of an entry-level phone. But all the same, if you do want a slightly larger display, the F92e 5G might be a bit better, but again, the difference isn't really huge, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE at 6.4 inches, I definitely think this display is still at least decently large, so if you're going to be on your phone a decent amount, you will still get a good experience. And in addition to this, with S21 FE, the image quality is quite a bit better. With the dynamic AMOLED, the brightness and colors look a lot nicer, things are quite a bit more vibrant, and if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any bright area, with an AMOLED type display, the S21 FE is going to be quite a bit easier to see. So if you are maybe spending a lot of time outside, this is definitely something to keep in mind. And then of course, the S21 FE has a 1080p resolution versus only 720p with the BLU F92e 5G. So if you're doing a lot of stuff like watching videos, for example, things will look quite a bit better with the S21 FE. So in general, while the BLU F92e 5G definitely doesn't have a bad display for what it is, and for more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, it will at least get the job done. If you're really going to be consuming a lot of content, especially stuff like videos, where the image quality is more important, between the two, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is definitely a much better choice here. Now for storage, both phones are getting 128GB of internal storage, but with the BLU F92e 5G, we are getting microSD card expansion, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone does not have microSD card expansion. Now this is a pretty common thing when it comes to higher end phones. Typically flagship phones like the S21 FE don't have microSD card expansion, but honestly with 128GB of internal storage, I feel like it's not really necessary. Sure, on one hand, if you already have a microSD card and you have all your information and photos and videos and stuff on it, then going to a phone that doesn't have a microSD card is probably going to be pretty annoying. So in that case, you might want to go with the BLU F92e 5G, so that way you can just put your existing microSD card into this phone. But aside from that, when it comes to the actual amount of storage, honestly, unless you're constantly downloading apps and games and stuff like that, I feel like the internal storage you get with these phones is going to be perfectly fine, and you probably won't even need a microSD card. But of course, if you do want microSD card expansion, the BLU F92e 5G will have an advantage, but aside from that, storage-wise, they are the same. For security features, both phones have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners. With the BLU F92e 5G, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's right here in the display. But starting with the BLU F92e 5G, let's give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive. No issues at all. And again, remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the BLU F92e 5G, up front we got a typical water drop notch for the front facing camera. This camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 0.3 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the front facing camera. This camera is 32 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera. One thing I do want to point out here is don't let the megapixel count fool you. The Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have a much higher quality camera, and the photo quality is significantly better here, so keep in mind, if you're taking a lot of pictures, maybe you're really into mobile photography or something like that, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be a much better choice because, again, the photos on this phone are just so much better. But that being said, with the BLU F92e 5G, I feel like when it comes to photo quality, it's definitely not that bad. In fact, you really wouldn't look at a photo taken with this phone and instantly assume it was taken from a lower end phone, because honestly, on something like social media, for example, the pictures are really just going to blend in with everything anyway. So unless you really care a whole lot about photo quality, really either phone here is going to be perfectly fine. That being said though, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have quite a bit more camera features. Like for example, it does have an ultra-wide camera, whereas with the BLU F92e 5G, although according to BLU's website, this phone is technically supposed to have an ultra-wide camera, I can't for the life of me find it on this phone. In the camera app itself, with pretty much every phone I've ever seen that has an ultra-wide camera, you should be able to open it by tapping on this right here. Either that or a dedicated icon, which obviously this phone doesn't have, and as you can see, it's not doing anything. Whereas if we go to the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, open the camera, there's a 0.5x right here. And as you can see, you can fit a lot more in the frame. So yeah, even if the BLU F92e 5G has a secret ultra-wide camera I just can't find, it's definitely not very user-friendly, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it obviously does have a normal ultra-wide camera that works, so if you do want to get those wider angle photos, definitely keep this in mind. And then in addition to this, despite not having a macro camera, the S21 FE does have a telephoto lens, which in my experience, you can basically use it the same way. And aside from just taking close-up images, with the telephoto lens, of course, you can also zoom in quite a bit better. So the bottom line here is, if you're really more of a casual camera user, and you're really not doing a ton on your phone, maybe you're taking a couple pictures for like Snapchat, social media, sending photos to friends and family, but really not a ton of stuff in general, and you don't really care about features, your needs are just a bit more basic, then in that case, the BLU F92e 5G is going to be perfectly fine. Keep in mind, this phone retails for $149, whereas the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE at full price retails for $599, so clearly the price difference is pretty big. But that being said, if you are more into taking pictures on your phone and you really want a bunch of nice features and you want to make sure to get the best quality you can, then in that case, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE might be worth it to you. Another thing I do want to point out here is that for video, the BLU F92e 5G has a max recording quality of 2K in the rear camera and then 1080p in the front, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone can't record 2K videos, but it can record in 4K in both the rear and front cameras, which is definitely quite a bit better. So same thing as the photos, if you're recording a lot of videos and you want real high quality, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is definitely the way to go. But if you're really not doing a ton and you're not really serious about your videos or anything like that, maybe it's just a casual social media thing, or again, sending to friends and family or something like that, in that case, the BLU F92e 5G is going to be perfectly fine. And compared to other phones in its price range, it is nice that it can at least record 2K videos. Now to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the BLU F92e 5G. Again, definitely not bad. I mean, for what it is, it gets the job done. And if you're posting pictures on like social media, for example, I feel like you really don't need that much more. And then here's a couple pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. And as you can probably tell, the quality is quite a bit higher on this phone, but again, is it really that necessary for more basic use? Probably not, but if you are more into taking photos on your phone and you really want that nice quality, you can really tell this is definitely a higher end device. So if that is important to you, then you might want to go with this phone instead. Now when it comes to the RAM and processor, with the BLU F92e 5G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Dimensity 700 processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. So big surprise here, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is quite a bit faster, and I mean by a lot too. If you're going to be on your phone all day, especially doing more demanding activities, you will get a much better experience with the S21 FE. But on the other hand, for more basic activities like light web browsing and social media use, and watching the occasional video every now and then and stuff like that, the BLU F92e 5G is honestly going to be perfectly fine. And for a phone you can get for less than $150, the performance we get with this phone is actually pretty impressive. So it really just comes down to what you're doing with your phone. On one hand, if you're really going to be on your phone a lot, maybe you're playing like Call of Duty all day or something like that, in that kind of situation, the S21 FE will give you a much better experience. But if you're really not using your phone a ton and you're just doing more basic activities anyway, I feel like the BLU F92e 5G is going to be plenty fast enough. Now I did run benchmark tests on these phones using Geekbench 5, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a huge advantage here. But that being said, honestly the BLU F92e 5G is still really not bad, so for more basic activities, if you're really not using your phone too much, it will still get the job done. But obviously, if you want the faster phone between the two, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is the way to go. Now for the batteries, with the BLU F92e 5G, this phone has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 10W fast charging, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25W fast charging. So between the two, the BLU F92e 5G is definitely going to get significantly better battery life. So in general, if the overall battery life is really a priority for you, the BLU F92e 5G will have an advantage. But keep in mind, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE with 25W fast charging versus again 10W with the BLU F92e 5G is going to charge a bit faster, and it also does have wireless charging, giving you a bit more flexibility too. So if the charging features in general are a bit more important to you, then this is something to consider too. For the software, with the BLU F92e 5G, this phone does have Android 12, and knowing BLU's software support, I seriously doubt it's actually going to get Android 13. So if you do get this phone, you are going to have to be okay with that. On the other hand, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have Android 13, and with Samsung software support, you can also expect several other major updates in the future. Another thing to keep in mind here is that with the BLU F92e 5G, this phone does not have NFC, whereas the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does. So if you like to use tap and pay, definitely keep this in mind too. But in conclusion, which of these phones is a better choice for you? As you can probably imagine, it really depends on what you're typically doing with your phone. On one hand, if you really just need something basic for really light use and more basic activities, the BLU F92e 5G is honestly going to be perfectly fine. Sure, it doesn't have a bunch of nice features like NFC and wireless charging, for example. It's not really that fast, and the camera isn't the best, but with the exception of not having NFC, it's really plenty good enough for pretty much all the basic functions you might be using your smartphone for. Stuff like web browsing, social media, taking the occasional nice photo here and there, and really just using the phone as a phone. For that kind of stuff, it will get the job done just fine, and it also does have a ton of storage. So for less than $200, you really can't go wrong here. On the other hand though, if maybe you're really into taking photos, so you want a really nice camera with a bunch of features, maybe you want to record 4K videos, you want features like NFC, granted you don't need to spend this kind of money to get NFC, but still, maybe you want wireless charging, a really nice high quality display, and a super fast processor too, then in that kind of situation, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will be worth the extra money for you. And keep in mind, at this point in 2023, although this phone technically retails for like $600, you can find it on Amazon for like $300 or $400. So even though it is quite a bit more expensive than something like the BLU F92e 5G, the S21 FE for what it is honestly a really good deal. So in general, to recap, if you're looking for something a bit more basic and you're really not using your phone a whole lot, you just need something solid that gets the job done, the BLU F92e 5G is going to be perfectly fine, and considering this phone is so affordable, it is definitely a great choice. But on the other hand, if you really are going to be using a lot of different features, if you want a faster processor, maybe you're going to be on your phone a lot, maybe you want a super nice camera that can record 4K videos, and you want a nice display for consuming content, then in that case, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is probably going to be a better choice. But this concludes my comparison between the BLU F92e 5G and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about each of them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.